Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to see the various types of indexes, especially the cluster index and the non-cluster index in SQL Server. In the previous lecture, we have started with how to create an index and what are the benefits of using index. Let's deep dive into cluster index. What is cluster index? Cluster index determines the physical order of data in the table. So, in this example, if you see this, it's an employee table where I have the ID column as 3214. I've inserted the first row as 3, second row as 2, third row as 1, and fourth row as 4. When I apply a clustered index in the ID column, what will happen here is the output will contain 1, 2, 3, 4. The data will be rearranged in the ascending order. So what does cluster index does for us? It changes the physical order of data inside the table. When you apply on top of the table, it changes it. For this reason, a table can have only one cluster index. You cannot have more than one cluster index inside a table. Primary key. So when you create a primary key constraint, it automatically creates a cluster index. Keep that in mind. Primary key automatically creates the cluster index. What is non-cluster index? The same table, I'm creating a non-cluster index. The syntax is very simple. Create and then you give the index name on the table, employees, and you are creating non-cluster index on the column name and you want to arrange it into ascending. When you apply this query, it is not physically going to reorder this table. It is going to create another table with name and the row address mapped to this table. So it will sort the name column in ascending order and create another table. So you will see that Arun, Ankur, Priya, Ramya. So it will create an ascending order of the name column and each value is pointing to a row address. So whenever you issue a select statement, select start from employees table where name equal to Arun. So just change this table name as employees. When you apply this query, what will happen here is it goes to this name, so it checks whether a non-cluster index there, yes. For this name column, you see that okay, for Arun, what is the row address? It goes and picks up. It doesn't scan the entire table to find Arun in this table. So what we get out of this? The data is placed in one place and the index in another place. So you have data is separated and index is separated. You are not touching the data anytime for non-clustered index. You can create multiple non-clustered index in a table. So for cluster index, you can create only one for table because your data is rearranged based on the index you are creating. For non-clustered index, you can create multiple things because your data is in one place and your index in another place. Let's look into the demo straight away. I'm going to create a table employees data and I'm going to insert 6 rows. Let's keep the order as such because I'm not going to create as a primary key and then we create a clustered index manually and see what happens. So I have created Arun, Priya, Ramya, Ankur, Anand, Shweta. These are the employees I'm creating. I'm creating Arun, Priya, Ramya, Ankur, Anand, Shweta. These are the employees I'm creating. I'm inserting these rows. I have inserted 6 rows. Let's create a cluster index manually. Create clustered index. Give the index as an index name. So I say that name cluster index. And then on which table we are doing it? Employees table. And we are going to give it on the name column and keep it as ascending. Before we create the cluster index, let's query the table and see it. So we are going to query the table now. Select start from employees data. You see that order is not in ascending order. Arun and Ankur is in 4th place. So let's apply the cluster index and see it. Let me select the table first again. You see that now order got rearranged. So based on the name column, you applied a cluster index. So Anand, Ankur, Arun, Priya, Ramya, Shweta. That's how cluster index can change the order of data inside a table. Now, let's apply a multi-cluster index inside a table. So you can add another column as well. For example, I'm going to add salary descending, right? So name ascending, salary descending, and see what happens. First, let me go and create it again. The operation got failed. The reason is you already created one cluster index on the table. You cannot create another cluster index on the table. So go back to the tables. The table we created is name cluster index. Go back to the table name cluster index. So refresh it. It is the index name. The table name is employees data. So go to the employees data table. Go to the indexes and you find that that index what we created is available. Just delete it. Now let's recreate this index again. Let's select from the table. If you see here now, Anand, the salary is 49,000. Ankur, the salary is 10,000. So it is like first you update a name ascending and then the salary descending. That's how you can create multi-column cluster index inside a table. Now let's create a table with the primary key and see whether we get cluster index or not. I'm going to create another table. I'm going to create this table name called employees data primary key test. So I'm going to give the ID column as a primary key. I'm going to create this table. The table got created successfully. Go back to the Object Explorer, refresh it. You see that employees data primary key is there. We haven't created any index on this table. Let's see whether index has been created automatically. You see that whenever you create a primary key, cluster index is automatically created. In p_help index, give this table name and see that in the table whatever index available will be shown. So we have seen that index name. If you see the index description, it is a clustered unique primary key. Okay. So because of primary key, you are getting clustered unique. You might be wondering how it came unique, right? You can create a unique or non-unique cluster key. So unique can be applied to your cluster and also to non-clustered index. So let's create another index. So we are going to say create cluster index. I'll create unique one. So under unique class test on this table and name equal name, I'm taking it as descending. Let's see what happens. So the command got completed successfully. So the index has been created. Go and check it. Yes, index has been created. We didn't insert any rows inside the table. So what is the use of unique cluster index? The use here is you are enforcing a unique constraint on the table using this index itself. So the name column will be unique always. The unique index you're trying to create for cluster can also be done for non-cluster index. Let's create a non-cluster index. We have been creating until now cluster index. So cluster index only one for table. For non-cluster index, we create a non-unique, probably non-clustered index. So I just remove this space and then index name test non-class on this employee table. Then I'm going to create primary key. I go back to the employees data, which have some data around it, and I'm going to say name descending, salary ascending. So I'm creating a non-cluster index on this table. If I go back to this table, already there is an index available. Let me delete it. It is a cluster index. Let me delete this index. Now I'm going to create this non-cluster index with two columns. Now you go back to the indexes and refresh it. You see that index has been created. Now we go back and select from this table. We see the non-cluster index already created on the table. That's how you create cluster index and non-cluster index on tables.